If you were born with Saturn in Aquarius, this week marks the official end of your Saturn return. And if you were born with Saturn in Pisces, welcome, my friends. This is the very beginning of your Saturn return. In honor of Saturn entering Pisces, we're giving you a 30-day free all-access pass to Chani Premium content. All you have to do is enter Saturn 30, that's SATURN, uppercase 30, in the redeem offer code section of the app and enjoy. Offer code is valid until March 31st. Hello and welcome. This is the Astrology of the Week Ahead podcast, and I'm your host, Chani Nicholas, the bearer of significant news sometimes. Look, Saturn is changing signs this week, which it does roughly every 2.5, 3 years. It's a big deal when Saturn changes signs. Saturn is the furthest planet out that we can see with the naked eye. So for a very long time, it was thought of as the very last planet. And it is a planet about boundaries and structure and authority and maturity, because Saturn loves to talk about the endings of things, and there will be an ending to all of our lives. And Saturn makes that explicitly clear. So when we go through a Saturn return about every 28, 29 years, we get a reality check. And we also get an invitation to grow the F up. Now, the Saturn return isn't the only thing. It's not the only trick in Saturn's wheelhouse. Every 7 years, we have either a Saturn return, a Saturn first quarter square, a Saturn opposition, a Saturn last quarter square, and then again, the Saturn return. We might say that the 7-year itch is very Saturnian in nature, because about every 7 years we go through a very defining Saturn transit, which means that Saturn is aspecting in the sky where it was when you were born in your birth chart. And so it makes these different angular or returning transits. And they mark significant moments in our life. So when you think back to like 7 years old, 14 years old, 21 years old, 28 years old, into when you're 30, you might notice that there are a lot of significant events that happen around those corners of our life. And as we all know, the end of our 20s and the beginning of our 30s are rude. They aren't here to placate us. The end of that decade and the beginning of a new one really does give us some kind of harsh awakenings. And the harshness is important. It's actually, I think, one of the most freeing things that we can really come to terms with. And that is that we will not live forever, that the time we have here is absolutely sacred and finite. And therefore, we are responsible for how we spend it. We're not in our own power when we're children, right? We are dependent on adults. So the first Saturn return that we go through at the end of our 20s and the beginning of our 30s is here to say, this is yours. This is your life. This is your time. You are now an adult. And therefore, what are you doing with your time? How are you carving it out in a really conscientious way to the best of your ability, right? You're not supposed to like ace everything with the first Saturn return. For a lot of people, it can feel like we are absolutely stopped in our tracks, that we can't go anywhere. We come up against a brick wall. We come up against an immovable obstacle. That is Saturn. Saturn says, stop. You can't go past this. This is a lesson you have to sit with. You have to be with. This is not something you can barrel through. This is about you taking, again, responsibility for your life and your choices. And that's not something we can necessarily do in an instant. Maybe some of you have and you can, and good for you. You can teach the rest of us. But most of us really have to grapple with something significant around the end of our 20s and turning 30. And it's not just that like number, although, it is the number because it's telling us like, oh, I'm not just going to be cute by accident forever, right? Like I don't just get to be a child forever. I don't get to be innocent anymore. I'm too old. I'm too grown. Like now it's time for me to really take this and do something with it. And we've got some time in the saddle. For a lot of us, the 20s are awkward and strange and weird, and we've got to figure our way through stuff. So it's not just people with Saturn in Pisces that are going to find this transit significant, because people with Saturn in Gemini, people with Saturn in Virgo, people with Saturn in Sagittarius are going to feel this transit majorly. Why? Because those are all the mutable signs: Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. And so when Saturn is in one of those signs, it's going to be making a hard aspect to the other signs. Think of it as like a cross, right? It's like there's something significant that's going to happen. So go look at your chart. Go pull up your chart on Chani.com or on the Chani app. If you're already on the app, just go look at it and take note. Do you have Saturn in Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces? If so, this is an incredibly defining couple of years for you. And it might put you through a test or two, but I promise you, if you want to learn something significant about yourself, if you want to accomplish something that is going to require all of you, this transit will help you do that. Okay, that is a little specific. If you don't have Saturn in any of those signs, if you have Saturn in a water sign like Scorpio or Cancer, this will actually be really supportive for you because Saturn will be trining your Saturn. Saturn in the sky will be trining your Saturn. So go look and see if you've got Saturn in Cancer or Scorpio. If you've got Saturn in Capricorn or Taurus, then it's also going to be really supportive for you because Saturn in Pisces will be sending a sextile to your Saturn. And if you've got Saturn in Aries, this won't necessarily impact you, at least between the Saturn in the sky and Saturn in your chart. Same goes for Leo, and same goes for Aquarius. Same goes for if you have Saturn in Libra. Saturn in the sky is not necessarily going to impact your Saturn in Libra at all. So that's the deal, Saturn to Saturn. Now, if you have any planets or points in Pisces or Gemini or Virgo or Sagittarius, you're going to feel this really a lot. Doesn't matter if you don't have Saturn there. You'll still feel this. And everyone will have an experience of Saturn in Pisces because whatever happens in the sky is a mirror of what's happening to us here on Earth. That's what I believe anyways. And so it's going to be going through the part of your chart that contains Pisces. And that will be the most important thing for you to focus on. We have a special horoscope just for Saturn's entrance into Pisces, which will be released when Saturn officially enters Pisces, which is on Tuesday, March 7th. So as of Tuesday, March 7th, it'll be up on our website, Chani.com, and also in the app under Current Sky Horoscopes. So check those out. On a collective level, also, Saturn in Pisces is going to teach us something important about how to be a jellyfish, how to be jello, how to wobble but also have shape, how to be transparent but also have a boundary, have a body. It is a strange combination because Saturn is a planet of heft and weight and sturdiness, and Pisces is the flowing waters. It's the fish. So fishes have bodies, but they're slippery and they're movable. And, it's going to be a very different time Saturn has been in one of its own signs for the past many years, 5 years or so. Saturn was in Capricorn and then in Aquarius. Saturn entered Capricorn in 2017, and then it's been in Capricorn and then Aquarius since then. So it's been in its own signs of rulership since 2017. So this was a time that was very Saturnian, meaning it was a lot about restriction and rules and consequences and separation and all the things that were really hard, but also about solitude. Isolation, yes. Quarantine, yes. But also, what did we learn through the solitude that we were forced into because of the pandemic? It's wild to think that a pandemic happened after a couple years of Saturn being in its own sign and during Saturn being in the second sign that it rules. We had such a Saturnian experience. I mean, quarantine was the epitome of a Saturn experience. Saturn removes us from things, says no, says stop, says sit down, puts a boundary, puts a literal wall in between us. And as horrific as the pandemic was, and many of us are still not over it or through it, the pandemic is still here, COVID is still everywhere, and we're, in a very different relationship with it now than we were at the beginning. But when you look back on pre-COVID you and your life, what has changed? What did the solitude or the isolation teach you? What did it help you get in touch with? What did it help you make room for? Now that we can look back on it, that's Saturn in Aquarius. That's Saturn in Capricorn and then Aquarius. That's Saturn at its kind of ultimate expression for very many years. Now it's moving into Pisces. It's going to be a very different tone. This is a very different vibe. Pisces is the queen of nonchalance, as best articulated by perhaps a pop star named Rihanna, right? And also it's interesting because we've got this huge Piscean signature starting to take shape on Tuesday the 7th. And we also have a full moon on the 7th in Virgo. Queen of anything but nonchalance, queen of hard work. We could say like the pop star Beyonce, right? So we've got like a very Beyonce, Rihanna kind of setup this week. And we need both. We need the hard work, and then we need that ability to let go and just be like, this is what it is, and isn't it glorious as it is? And there's something so wild happening because within an hour or so of the full moon, so the full moon is on Tuesday, March 7th at 4:40 a.m. Pacific time, Saturn moves into Pisces, major turn of events, at 5:35 a.m. Pacific time. So it's less than an hour apart from one another that, these two significant moments happen. Saturn changing signs is way more significant than the full moon, but having it change signs just after the full moon peaks is wild to me astrologically. I don't know how it will show up here on Earth, but when a planet sits at that last degree where Saturn will be when the full moon actually peaks, there's like this feeling of culmination of energy. Like this is the final moment of Saturn in Aquarius as the full moon in Virgo peaks. And then right after that, it gets released into its new sign. And it's such a different feeling. And again, it pulls focus in these two areas, this like teeter-totter of the zodiac. Virgo, the one who's focused on the details, hardworking, skill-oriented, driven to be useful. And Pisces, the one that's trying to give us the gestalt, the overall feeling of something, and help us to connect to something larger than ourselves, help us to feel like there's less boundary between us. So Saturn's going to be hard-pressed to be itself in Pisces. And we'll have to see how it works out. Like there could be a whole new feeling or set of rules that we start to take on. We might all have to be a lot more flexible in some area of our life. And again, still hold the shape of things. So people with sun in Pisces are going to really feel this. Moon in Pisces, ascendant in Pisces, midheaven in Pisces, like anything in Pisces, you're going to really feel this transit. It's going to take a couple years, though, to complete itself. So we don't know how exactly it's going to all pan out. It's just the beginning this week. But it's a really significant week. March is filled with significant astrology, and this is this week's contribution. All right, I know I went on a long tangent about Saturn through your chart. To cut everything short at this late stage, you could also just go into the transit section of the app and see if Saturn's doing anything significant. Look under long-term transits and see if the beginning of this Saturn in Pisces moment is specifically important to your chart. And as Saturn gets close to doing something in your chart, it'll come up in the transit section of the Chani app. So keep checking that to see when that might be for you. All right. But having a full moon in Virgo is a opportunity to look at the details of things, to understand the ways in which we've been working really hard at something, and to see service as a means to happiness. Most of the people that I know that have a ton of success are only happy if they also feel like they are in service of something much bigger than themselves, which we might say is to just be in service of each other. I think that success without service is an equation for misery. So Virgo's like, look, any way you can be of service to other people, strangers, good friends, family members, anyone, that is a way to feel your wholeness. It's in those small acts of offering up your skills and offering up what you have, your tools. Virgo loves a tool and a skill. Offering those up to something that gets us to that other side of the equation, right? Like, okay, this is the little thing that I have. And we often feel like this isn't enough. I can't offer this because it's not big and fancy. It's not the most. But when we offer what we have in the way we can offer it, it's always more than enough. And that's what Virgo teaches us. And if Virgo's on one side of the zodiacal wheel and Pisces is on the other, Virgo teaches us that when we offer what we have, no matter how small, no matter how insignificant we think it is, when we offer it in service and in humility, it gets us to the other side. It gets us to that Piscean experience of oneness and of being part of something bigger than ourselves. And so that's really also the point at which this week stretches our consciousness, because the full moon happens, and then again, within an hour, Saturn moves into Pisces saying, this is what we're learning now. We're going to learn something about compassion. We're going to learn something about the rules of oneness. We're going to learn something about how to take a disciplined approach towards feeling unity, because that's what Pisces is after. It's also going to be really good for poetry and art and all creative pursuits, because wherever Saturn goes, it brings a definition of something if we do the work. And Pisces is here for feelings, poetry, all works of imagination, and also for extending ourselves out and for focusing on the fact that we are all inextricably connected and dependent on one another. All right. The other things that are happening this week, because there's more than just this, but it feels like Tuesday just really steals the show. On Monday, March 6th, the sun makes a sextile with Uranus, which is fun. It's exciting. It's experimental. It's really good for trying new things. Then on Tuesday, everything happens. The full moon in Virgo at 4:40 a.m. Pacific time. Saturn enters Aquarius at 5:35 a.m. Pacific time. Then on Saturday, we've got Venus sextiling Mars, which feels really fun and very flirty. We've got Mercury making that same sextile to Uranus, which feels like really wild conversations and spontaneous trips to the library or the bookstore or to a poetry reading or something like that, go for it. And then also on Saturday, we've got, which does feel kind of major, we've got Jupiter making a conjunction with Chiron. So if you remember from a couple weeks ago, we had that pileup of Venus and Jupiter and Chiron all in Aries. And on Saturday, the 11th, Jupiter makes its official connection with Chiron. What does this mean for us? Well, it means that we might learn something about our wounds, learn something about healing, learn something from a teacher that's significant. This is such a beautiful day to reach out to the teachers in your life or to anybody that you feel has taught you a significant lesson, because it really is the mark of a teacher, a mentor, and there's something kind of significant here to be mentored by. It can also be the kind of signature that shows us how much we grow through really learning how to address our wounds. So it might not bring up an old wound. It could magnify something that hurts. But again, if it gets magnified, it's going to show you where the cure is. So there is a cure here because it's Jupiter. And the cure has something to do with generosity, has something to do with learning, with teaching, with wisdom in and of itself. So take note of anything that you stumble across that helps you to understand your own pain in a greater, wider context. Sometimes when we give our pain body or the part of us that's kind of crumpled in something, if we give it some more space, we just think, well, what if I just gave this more space? What if I opened up a little bit to hold this thing, to let it breathe? What would happen? Jupiter always teaches us how to expand. So we don't want to expand our pain necessarily, but we want to expand to be able to give it the space it needs to heal. Sometimes we just need to have a little bit of space. So that is the reading for the week. It's a big one. We've got a ton of stuff for you in the app to work with this. We have a full moon ritual for the full moon. And again, check back for your horoscopes if you're not a subscriber to the app. If you are a subscriber to the Chani app, I've got a very detailed reading for you about Saturn in Pisces and what it means for your chart specifically. So check that out if you can. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being on this ride. I'm really interested, fascinated to see how Saturn in Pisces rolls out for us. And I'm hopeful that the flexibility that it seems to be signifying is going to be something that helps us feel a little bit more flow and openness in our life. All right, y'all, I just wanted to say thank you all again, continually, eternally, for reviewing the app in the App Store and for leaving us feedback. I wanted to share this one with you. It's called Companion and Guide. The Chani app serves as a touchstone, grounding, and guide for me as I move through my days and weeks. Chani and the team keep me in the present, paying attention to what is moving and what I am being called to engage and learn. The ways that the team has shaped the readings in relationship to our collective work and evolution is a deal maker for me. And I am ever grateful for this tool to connect me to myself and our work with the community of all of creation. This app has deepened my relationships and my life's work in countless ways. Grateful, love it. Sending you lots of love, many full moon, Saturn entering Pisces blessings. Bye for now.